Imagine walking through life convinced that you know exactly who you are. You believe you're honest, kind, patient, reasonable. You tell yourself that the people who lie are different from you. The people who explode with anger are simply weak. Those who manipulate others are just bad people. It feels comforting to divide the world into two groups, people like us and people who are not. But what if that certainty is an illusion? What if the qualities you reject most in others aren't always foreign to you? What if they are reflections of parts of yourself you've never dared to face? Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung spent decades exploring questions like these. As he listened to patients, studied myths, examined dreams, and reflected on his own inner life, he reached a startling conclusion. Every human being carries an unseen companion, a hidden personality, a forgotten self. He called it the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It isn't a monster hiding in the darkness, waiting to take control. It is made up of the thoughts, emotions, desires, fears, and impulses that we push out of our awareness because they don't fit the image we want to have of ourselves. From childhood, we're taught which behaviors earn praise and which bring punishment. We learn to smile when we're angry, stay quiet when we're afraid, and hide emotions that others may reject. Slowly, we begin building a version of ourselves that the world accepts. Jung called this public identity the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate everyday life. The persona helps us function in society. It allows us to cooperate, work, build friendships, and belong. But every mask hides a face. For every quality we proudly display, another may be pushed into the background. Confidence can hide insecurity. Generosity can conceal resentment. Calmness may cover fear. Over time, these unwanted parts don't disappear. They simply move out of sight. Jung believed that what we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves doesn't vanish. Instead, it gathers in the unconscious, quietly influencing our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. This is why someone else's success can make us unexpectedly angry. Why a small criticism can feel like a personal attack. Why certain people trigger emotions that seem far greater than the situation deserves. Often, we assume the problem is entirely outside us. Jung invited us to consider a more difficult possibility. Sometimes, the strongest emotional reactions point inward. Think about the last person who instantly irritated you. Perhaps they seemed arrogant. Maybe they interrupted others, sought attention, or acted as though the rules didn't apply to them. Now ask yourself a question, not to assign blame, but to become curious. Why did that particular behavior affect you so deeply? The answer isn't always simple. Sometimes another person's actions are genuinely harmful, but at other times, our emotional reactions are intensified by something hidden within ourselves. Jung called this projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute parts of ourselves to someone else. Instead of recognizing those qualities within us, we see them only in the people around us. The result is strange. We become experts at spotting flaws everywhere except within ourselves. History is filled with examples of this pattern. Entire communities have blamed outsiders for problems rooted much closer to home. Individuals have condemned in others the very traits they secretly struggled with themselves. The shadow doesn't announce its presence. It whispers. It appears in sudden anger, persistent jealousy, unexplained resentment, or an intense fascination with people we barely know. The more we insist, "I could never be like that," the more worthwhile it becomes to ask why the possibility feels so threatening. Facing the shadow is uncomfortable because it challenges the story we've told ourselves about who we are. But according to Jung, this discomfort is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. Because the path toward understanding ourselves rarely starts with certainty. It starts with a question. What if the person I know least is myself? No one enters the world wearing a mask. A child doesn't worry about appearing successful, intelligent, or emotionally composed. They cry when they're hurt, laugh without hesitation, and express curiosity without fear of judgment. In those early years, emotion flows naturally. But as we grow, we begin to receive messages, some spoken, others unspoken. Good children don't get angry. Stop crying. Be strong. Don't embarrass the family. Act like a lady. Boys don't show fear. Little by little, we learn that some parts of ourselves are welcomed, while others are discouraged or rejected. To earn love, approval, and acceptance, we adapt. If curiosity is mocked, we become quieter. If sadness is punished, we hide our tears. If anger leads to rejection, we bury it beneath a smile. These changes often happen so gradually that we hardly notice them. Carl Jung believed that this process creates two versions of ourselves. The first is the persona, the face we present to the world. It is the version that helps us fit into society, build relationships, and meet expectations. The second is the shadow, the collection of traits, emotions, and impulses we push out of awareness because they seem unacceptable. The shadow is not created because we are bad people. It is created because every culture, every family, and every community teaches us which qualities deserve approval and which should remain hidden. Imagine a child who is naturally outspoken. Every time they express a strong opinion, they are told to stay quiet. Eventually, they stop speaking their mind, not because the impulse disappears, but because they've learned it carries a cost. Years later, as an adult, they may admire confident people while secretly resenting them. They might tell themselves, those people are arrogant, without realizing that the confidence they criticize is something they once possessed but learned to suppress. This doesn't mean every criticism is projection. Some people truly behave in harmful ways. Jung's insight was more subtle. Sometimes our strongest emotional reactions point toward unresolved parts of ourselves. Modern psychology also recognizes that childhood experiences shape personality, emotional regulation, and patterns of behavior, even though many contemporary psychologists explain these processes differently from Jung. Think about how often people say, "I never get angry." "I don't care what anyone thinks." "I'm always fine." Statements like these often sound starch, they're investigative great. Statements like these often sound stilled cape reassuring, but real human beings experience a wide range of emotions. Denying those emotions doesn't make them disappear, it simply makes them harder to recognize. What remains hidden can still influence our choices. A person who suppresses anger may become passive-aggressive. Someone who hides fear may avoid opportunities without understanding why. A person who believes they must always appear perfect may live under constant pressure, terrified of making even a small mistake. The shadow doesn't always reveal itself through dramatic outbursts. Sometimes it appears as exhaustion, brightness as anxiety, sometimes as the quiet feeling that you're living a life that doesn't fully belong to you. Jung believed that personal growth doesn't come from pretending these hidden parts don't exist. It begins when we become curious enough to notice them. Not with judgment, not with shame. Commissioners, honesty. Because the qualities we reject are often carrying a message. And until we listen, they continue speaking in ways we don't expect. Imagine standing before a mirror that doesn't reflect your face. Instead, it reflects the parts of your personality you've spent years trying to hide. Your jealousy, your pride, your insecurity, your hunger for recognition. Most of us would look away, not because these qualities are impossible to face, but because we've spent our lives believing they belong to someone else. Carl Jung believed that one of the mind's most remarkable defenses is projection. Projection happens when we unconsciously attribute our own hidden thoughts, emotions, or traits to other people. In other words, instead of recognizing something within ourselves, we experience it as though it exists only in someone else. Imagine a man who constantly accuses his colleagues of seeking attention. He complains that everyone wants to be admired. He criticizes their confidence. He mocks their achievements. Yet deep inside, he carries an unspoken desire to be recognized himself. Because that desire doesn't fit the image he has of being humble, his mind pushes it into the background. The longing doesn't disappear, it simply changes direction. Now he notices it everywhere except within himself. This is the quiet power of projection. It doesn't erase uncomfortable emotions. It changes where we believe they come from. Jung suggested that the people who provoke the strongest emotional reactions often reveal something important, not necessarily about them, but about us. Think about the last time someone made you unexpectedly angry. Was it really their behavior alone, or did it touch an insecurity you were already carrying? Perhaps a coworker received praise that you secretly wished for. Perhaps a friend's confidence reminded you of opportunities you never took. Perhaps someone's honesty challenged a truth you had been avoiding. These moments don't prove that your reaction is irrational. Sometimes people genuinely behave unfairly. But Jung encouraged us to ask a deeper question. Why does this affect me so strongly? That question shifts our attention from blame to curiosity. Modern psychology also recognizes that people can misattribute their own feelings or motivations to others in certain situations, although researchers describe these processes in different ways and don't always use Jung's framework. The important lesson is not that every criticism is projection. Far from it. Sometimes criticism is accurate. Sometimes injustice is real. But if the same emotional pattern appears again and again, across different people, different places, and different stages of life, it may be worth asking whether the source lies only in the outside world. Imagine carrying a backpack without realizing it's there. Every hill feels steeper. Every journey feels heavier. You blame the road. You blame the weather. You blame the distance. Only later do you discover that the weight has been on your shoulders all along. The shadow works in much the same way. What remains unseen can quietly shape how we interpret the world. Jung believed that real freedom begins the moment we stop asking, "What's wrong with everyone else?" and begin asking, "What is this experience trying to teach me about myself?" That question is uncomfortable, but it is also the first step towards self-awareness. Because the greatest prison is not ignorance. It is believing there is nothing left to discover about yourself. Most people imagine the shadow as something dramatic, a sudden burst of anger, a violent act, a complete loss of control. But according to Carl Jung, the shadow rarely announces itself so loudly. More often, it speaks in whispers. It hides in ordinary moments. The sarcastic comment you instantly regret. The resentment you can't explain. The opportunity you never take because fear quietly convinces you that you'll fail. The relationship that keeps repeating the same painful pattern. These moments may seem unrelated, yet Jung believed they can all point toward the same hidden source. The parts of ourselves we've refused to acknowledge. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase every day. At first, the weight is obvious, but after years of carrying it, something strange happens. You stop noticing the suitcase. The weight begins to feel normal. You assume everyone feels this exhausted. Everyone feels this anxious. Everyone struggles this much. But the weight is still there. The shadow works in much the same way. The emotions we bury don't disappear. They continue influencing our choices from outside our awareness. Someone who has buried their anger may avoid conflict for years. On the surface, they appear calm and agreeable. Friends describe them as patient. Co-workers admire their self-control. Yet beneath that calm, frustration quietly accumulates. One day, a small disagreement triggers an explosive reaction that surprises everyone, including the person experiencing it. People often say, "That came out of nowhere." Jung would likely disagree. It didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere that had been ignored for far too long. The same pattern appears in fear. A child who learns that mistakes are unacceptable may grow into an adult who avoids every meaningful risk. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack ability, but because failure has become emotionally dangerous. Their shadow whispers, "Stay where it's safe." Years pass. Dreams remain unfinished. Opportunities disappear. Life becomes smaller, not because of reality, but because of an unseen belief quietly directing every decision. The shadow can also shape relationships. Sometimes we search for people who confirm the stories we've been telling ourselves for years. Someone who believes they are unworthy may repeatedly accept unhealthy relationships because they feel strangely familiar. Someone who fears abandonment may become controlling without realizing that fear, not love, is guiding their actions. These patterns are rarely intentional. They are often unconscious. Modern psychology also recognizes that early experiences can influence emotional patterns and relationships throughout adulthood, though researchers explain these patterns using different theories than Jung did. Jung's central insight was not that we should eliminate the shadow. He believed that was impossible. Every human being has emotions they would rather not face. Every person carries contradictions. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Because what remains unconscious doesn't stop influencing us. It simply does so without our permission. The greatest danger isn't having a shadow. The greatest danger is believing you don't have one. The moment we insist, "I would never do that," or "I'm nothing like those people," we may have closed the very door that leads to greater self-understanding. For Jung, the shadow was never an enemy to destroy. It was a teacher, a difficult one, sometimes uncomfortable, often unsettling. But if we are willing to listen, it has the potential to reveal not only our weaknesses, but also our hidden strengths. Because buried within the shadow are not only the qualities we've rejected, but also the parts of ourselves we've never had the courage to become. If today's exploration sparked a new way of thinking, remember that self-understanding is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice of curiosity, reflection, and honest observation. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep questioning, keep observing, and never stop exploring the hidden world within.